Also, the town we moved to had a lot of trees, deciduous trees, but like it was an old town, so they were old trees. And so what I'm saying is, right around my street, and for a lot of streets, you couldn't really see the sky. It was the trees on each side of the street were so big they grew over the street, just tree after tree after tree. I'll just do this. This is like a Ponce de León fancy hat. You know, like those asymmetrical, super fancy asymmetrical hats that designers design. This could be one, right? Ponce de León would wear it. Or Ponce de León, I don't know how to say his name. The Ponce. You know, the Fountain Youth guy. The explorer. All those explorers back in the whatevers, 1500s, 1500s, all those explorers for generations, they all wore fancy hats. You could look at the pictures. So like Ponce de León was one of the Ponces about it, though. If you're Poncing it, I mean, that, you know, Ponce was well known for having the most fanciest hats of all the navigators, the global navigators, Ponce de León. So nowadays, 500 years later, it's hip, when you're wearing a hip asymmetrical kind of fancy hat that you would, you know, model down the runway, it's like $10,000 or $28,000 for this hat, right? It's, you're Ponce de León in it. You're Poncing it. That's what we call it. You look it up in Urban Dictionary, I bet I'm right. Anyways, this would be like what one would look like. It would look weird. They all look weird. You go over to Kentucky Derby? Those really rich people wearing those crazy fancy hats, they get them specially made for that year only, for one wear. Oh, right? I don't know how much those things cost. Not $10,000, they don't. No. Probably closer to $100,000. So imagine what Ponce de León, one of the navigators of the world, with kings and queens back in the 1500s, whatever. Imagine how much money he spent on these hats, right? No expense could be spared. That's why they got so outlandish, so wild and outlandish. But I don't know, you know, I don't know what it is. Some people just have style and moxie, and they can pull it off, right? There's something to it. Like that, the reason this couldn't actually be is because I don't have any, haberdasher style. I don't realize that this is unpleasant looking. Not because I don't have a pleasant looking head, but like this asymmetry doesn't work right. Like an artist, a hat artist, a haberdasher from the 1500s, from the 2100s, from the 2000s, right? They have that aesthetic sense. They would be like, yeah, okay, I see what you're doing with the jumble and the crazy kind of chaotic poof. And I like it, but this is incomplete over here. It would be better if we made this the same as that, symmetrical, but this we moved over to be hyper asymmetrical. Right? That's better. Right? That's better. No, that's worse. You know what I'm saying? So for me, unlike Ponce, this isn't a style statement. I'm not trying to impress the other navigators. I'm not trying to go around the world showing off to all the different cultures. You know, look at my Ponce hat. Right? He's not looking for the Fountain of Youth yet. That happened later. That's when he was a little ego-oriented. He was a little kind of hooked on his Ponceness. And when he started to age, he started to get panicky. That's a different story. This is about his early career when he was just a playboy. He happened to be a great navigator and just a stylistic genius, at least when it came to the hats. You ask any 21st century haberdasher about the hats of Ponce de León, which he didn't build them, but he helped co-design them, and he mostly popularized them. Not that anybody else around him could ever afford or would maybe even want to wear one like that, but like he impressed, for sure it was impressive. He was a one of a kind, but like all the navigators did it. He set a trend, and you know, you weren't any kind of a navigator if you weren't Poncing it. His were always the best. He was like the Cam Newton of stylish football players, always working on his style, maybe more than his game. That is his game, turns out. He's still styling it, right? That's what Ponce de León was like. And so all the other navigators wanted to imitate, so they got their own kind of Ponce hats made. And they weren't too dissimilar than this. You notice, I'm not wrong about the asymmetry. That's the one thing I'm right about. And if it's a symmetrical hat, then they wear it asymmetrical, you know, the crooked hat. Your head's not going like this. It just looks like it is. Your head's like this, but the hat's like that, right? Like going out that way. Mostly it's a feminine fashion, but it needn't be gendered. Men wear hats. Ponce sure did. He wore the hattiest hats, right? Women couldn't even get away with wearing those these days. Super flamboyant and flashy. But, I mean, undoubtedly autistic and beautiful. I realize every time I say the word artistic, it sounds like I'm saying autistic, which I'm sure I'm autistic. Otherwise, who makes videos like this? And I'm not trying to make fun of autism. I think for sure I'm on that spectrum. Of course, it's a spectrum. Everybody's on it. But I mean, I think I'm a little bit further up. But yeah, I realize I watch my videos. I say the word artistic a lot, but I say it like I say it autistic. It's artistic, autistic. It's the way the Deckard says aw. And say R. Aw. It's like A-W, maybe a silent H, R, H, aw. What does that sound? How do you spell that sound? Autistic. So that's unfortunate, but I mean artistic. For sure Ponce was artistic. He might have been autistic. He probably was. Everybody's on the spectrum. But maybe that participated into his genius with his hats. All I'm saying is, you get the idea. It's pretty funny, right? You look at some of those hats, they're pretty funny. Old-fashioned is always kind of funny. But that doesn't mean it's not beautiful or well-crafted. It was always probably pretty well-crafted. That's the one thing you could probably take for granted back in the 1500s. Like if you were paying top dollar for like good clothes, I mean, it was handmade by, I don't know, were there like J. Crews back then, or was everything like a Fairmont Fairbanks or Rags, you know what I mean? Or was there middle ground? I don't think there wasn't Costco's and Walmart's. There wasn't like, you know, decently looking but poorly made clothes. Nobody would put the effort. It's just a rag, or they're well-made clothes. They might not be stylish, but they're well-made. That's what I'm saying. And then some of them, even the stylish ones, might be kind of like absurd, like this hat I'm wearing. This is modeling a hat from 18th century, 17th century, 1700s, 18th century France. Regional, not Paris, regional capital though, right? Someone who could afford a hat of this make, but, you know, isn't actually at court. At the Tuileries or the Louvre or where was the court in the 18th century? Versailles. Listen to that guy. Is that a real bug? Or was that like a drone? Do like drones make fake, do fake bug drones make fake bug sounds? Because that sounded intense. Right? He didn't like this hat. He did not like this hat. Look, I'm not saying it's well made. I just threw this together, but I'm trying to give you an idea of what you could do, what they used to do. You know, it was style over function for sure. You know, he might even have this kind of a look, like it's a fake patched eye. Like you can't even see now. You've just completely got rid of your, what's that, dimensional viewing. You're a navigator. This is a bad call, right? Why would you deliberately hamper yourself for the sake of style, my man? Look, we're going to run into something out here. I know it. I'm Ponce de León. This is what matters to me, though. Look how cool I look. Right? I got this fake eye patch. Like, it doesn't really move, but yeah, it impairs my vision a lot, right? But luckily, I'm a good navigator, so I don't need it. I'm not saying I don't need the eye. I'm not taking out the eye, but for the style, I'll lose the side of the eye for this hat. So I wear a new hat every day. This is just going in the collection, never to be worn again at the end of the day today. But for today, right here on the deck, look at this. Look at how everyone's looking at me. Right? This is how Ponce does it. For sure. I myself don't like it because I'm not a good navigator and I can barely see where I'm standing right now. So this is just an example of like what he would do. Style over function. Way more. Those guys didn't have a lot to do back then. Think about it. There was no internet. There were no social medias. There wasn't even broadcast on the news they had to watch. You couldn't rent a video. What were you doing? Sailing on a boat around the world, bumping into stuff, and doing some charting probably, keeping some order for mutinies happening, which is probably why he wore the hats in the first place. The style statement of the hats is just good for morale. You know? Of course, he wouldn't participate directly in it. That's what the first mate does. The interactor between like the captain, who nobody ever even dares even look at. You walk by the captain, you put your head down. Right, but the 94 crewmates, they like to, they vote on how good they like his hat that day. And it's good for morale. And Ponce knows it because his first mate tells him, but he pretends he doesn't. But that's how you had to participate. You didn't interact with the riffraff. Not if you were a Ponce de León. But I mean, you couldn't get other Ponce de Leons to row the boats and whatever with the sails. Right? So you had to, get people who needed to do that work, but you didn't associate with them. No, sir. But you had to prevent a mutiny, though. Sometimes. And his whole thing was he boosted morale with his silly hats. He took them serious. Everybody took them serious, but I mean, they're silly hats. And the crew members didn't laugh at them. They voted on them on how magnificent they were versus how they weren't feeling. They're very sophisticated. Like I just finished saying, you didn't have a lot to do back then. You thought a lot about your styles. That's where style comes from. Like these bored ship goers, weeks and weeks and weeks and months to go around the world. Months. What do they got to do? They got a lot of time to think about hat styles and what their opinions on different hat styles are and why they might be. Of course they take them seriously. It's all part of the game. They're not unintellectual. They got nothing but time to do. What do you think they do? They develop their minds, right? Probably, and they drink. If they can, if Ponce lets them. But one way he does let them have fun is he wears these absurd hats. But everyone takes him seriously. So these objects, these art objects he wears, these hats are objects of art. And the crew does basically a formal art critique, an art criticism, but just amongst themselves, just for fun. And it helps pass the hours away. They debate about it. They have, I don't know how it goes. I wasn't on those ships, but you could see how this would happen. Tell me how else you would explain those crazy Ponce de León hats and the whole fashion. Like I said, all the navigators did it. It was an effective leadership tool. But that doesn't mean that you weren't styling it. He would have done it even if he was, if he could afford it. Even if he was a lazy gentleman who just went to the shows in London or wherever Ponce is from. He was just a gentleman on the town. He'd still have been a styling doing it. Like Oscar Wilde was like that. His whole thing wasn't sailing the world. He had a different whole thing. And he wasn't a hat-wearing dude, maybe. But, he had a style, he had a personality. Ponce's personality came out in his hats. Oscar Wilde's personality came out in his witticisms and just his presence. Right? And he also was a writer, for sure. So I guess there's that. But he was famous for just his presence. Right? But we don't have, Ponce wasn't like that. He was charismatic in a different way. He could rock these hats. You wouldn't laugh at Ponce. He was a little man. They all were back then, right? Tallest was Magellan, the tallest, at 5'9 3/4. He couldn't even scrape up 5'10. Ponce was probably 5'3. With the hat, maybe 6 feet. Maybe that's part of why he did it. Get some of them tall hats. I don't know. I haven't really read anything about Ponce de León since probably 8th grade. So I don't really know what I'm talking about. But for sure, you go Wikipedia and you see these funny hats. And I'm telling you, there's got to be a history for it. I think my history could be. It's an alternative one, maybe. But why not, right? There's a universe out there where this is exactly the case. I just instantiated it into a superposition by talking about it. Now it's out there. Now nobody can do it. Now there's a world out there where Ponce de León was exactly as described. Walking around, who knows what he did in his cabin at night. He probably took off shirts, undergarment, and made his own designs on his head, maybe. Doing exactly what I'm doing. Because I'll tell you what, one thing I've learned in this story is how fun it is to just wear your shirt in different absurd hat formations, because it keeps the heat off it, like the sun heat, but it allows it to breathe around the rim, so it keeps the humid heat out. It doesn't store it. It's not a greenhouse effect. So that's what I learned. So imagine Ponce. He probably was doing the same thing, and then one day he's like, I kind of like the way this looks. I don't know. They didn't have cell phones, right? So there weren't selfies, but he had a mirror probably, for sure. I don't know. Maybe he was into style, right? Now he is. Now there was one that was like this. I created this universe just now. So there you go. And I'll tell you one thing, besides, unrelated, back to 38% humidity. It sure as hell is. I don't detect any sweat or heat, and it's hardly any kind of a breeze, and every once in a while there is a bit of a breeze, and it's like a 1 mile an hour breeze, and I can feel it. When it's humid, you don't feel that. It's not enough to move the air. You can't feel a 1 mile an hour breeze when the air is so heavy. It doesn't move that air. It's like, what's the lightest breeze you could feel? You can't feel it when it's humid because that air is too heavy to move at that light speed. Not light speed. That would be the opposite of light speed. 1 mile an hour. Which when you're down below 38% humidity, you could feel it because the air is so light. I could feel that tree leaf move. But, I could feel that. That leaf just, like there's no intervening humidity, heaviness between that leaf's movement and the slight tiny breeze it gave me on my cheek. That's how you can know it's not humid, when you can feel the slightest of breezes. And the bugs exonerate my opinion. Did you hear that? Yeah, anyway, that's enough about Ponce de León. I don't know. This video could either take off from here, or it's done and it would be time for a new unrelated video, or just time to continue my walk. But I feel like I'm not ready to be done talking. I know the clock just went off, but I don't know what time it was, talking right through it. It had to be 3 o'clock, right? Yeah, because I left it like